Is there?
I do know this. If he gets in here for any, if he is back, right, and I want him to be back, I think we're all three of us are pro Brandon Aiyuk being on this team, and get the price done, get him in, and figure it out. But if he comes back and he is on a deal less than $29 million, shame on everyone for taking this long to get that done. If this is south of $30 million, that deal could have been struck a fucking month ago, is how that really feels. So if they're twiddling,
but there's no games in between, so there's no real motivation. I mean, and things get done when there's a deadline. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I mean, like, so what? So we can feel better? I mean, there are no games.
He would have been in for mandatory minicamp. So he would have been there for the full off season. So he and Brock Purdy are the guys walking out and shotgunning beers at the Luke Bryant concert or whatever. Like, I just want the team to be all on the same page and together in a year you're trying to win the Super Bowl. And like, if this really comes down to, and they spent 4 months in public dicking around over, $1.8 million. Like, fuck everybody if that's what this is going to be. Like, we got him done at 28, not 26, and it took us 3 more months to bridge that $2 million Like,
this is the level of hardball that they must feel they need to play through Parag Marate's negotiation when they have a quarterback making what he's making. But Mr. Irrelevance says Niners and BA seem $4 million off. Buckner and the Niners were in the neighborhood of $2 to $3 million off, and he says BA might be gone. Is there? I think most people assume the deal's getting done. Most people assume the deal's getting done probably close to the regular season. I hope that's not the case because I'd like to see him get some practice reps. But should the Niners have a walkaway price? Should the Niners? If Aiyuk just says, you know what, I gotta have 30 million, and they really don't feel like supply and demand and all the other factors and usage rates and that he's not worth $30 million, is it in their best interest to try to make a move, try to make a trade for him? And if so, to me, it seems like I wouldn't want him to go to Green Bay, but New England, anybody in the AFC not named Kansas City or Baltimore, I'd be pretty much open-minded. He wants Pittsburgh, Chargers, Raiders, Patriots. I could work a deal out with any of those teams.
To Damon's point, I think the Niners have messed this up in spectacular fashion, and I give San Francisco credit. Historically, under John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, they've been a forward-thinking, innovative, savvy organization. But with these contract extensions, they've operated in an old-school type of way in the sense of, well, we've always done it this way, so why change? We always give out these contract extensions late July, early August, and in the case of Nick Bosa last year, it lasted until September because we made him at the time the highest-paid non-quarterback in the history of the NFL. But you have to have better financial and mental wherewithal throughout what has happened this entire offseason. Because when Calvin Ridley got $23 million per year from the Tennessee Titans, that should have sent a message to you, oh man, that reset the wide receiver market. We might have to act a little bit quicker and not operate as we usually have with Brandon Aiyuk, like we have with other players in the past, because that reset the market the first time. And then Devontae Smith got $25 million per year. And then A.J. Brown got $32 million per year. Then Amon-Ra St. Brown got 28. Jalen Waddle got 28. Now, if Brandon Aiyuk were to get the targets of a Jalen Waddle and an A.J. Brown and an Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think that his production would be really good. And that's probably where the Niners look at Aiyuk's new deal and saying, look, Debo's making around 24. Our asking price right now is at about $26 million. We feel as though with the production that you've put up, you're worth that number. But then Aiyuk is probably saying, in a run-centric offense, I was a second-team All-Pro, and look at the numbers that I've put up. So the 49ers have kind of put themselves into a corner here in which I'm not sure the leverage is on their side. And I think that Aiyuk has an argument to be made that he is worth 28 to 30 million, especially with Justin Jefferson now making 35. Obviously, he's not worth that, but did that in turn increase the price tag from 26 to 28 and maybe even $30 million?
I think the Waddle deal, maybe more than anything, Chase, is what threw the wrench in the works here, because Waddle is not the number one receiver on his own team.
Exactly.
So the Dolphins are paying WR2 $28 million. And if you were going to be comfortable with $28 million, and maybe a month ago Aiyuk would have been, now you're uncomfortable with it.
Yeah.
Again, they did. I think they waited too long. Now, with any trade, Larry, like you said, is they decide it's too much now. Okay, so you've decided it's too much now, 2-3 months too late. But okay, any trade for who, for what? I'll judge the trade when you tell me what's coming back, and I'm not going to tell you that any trade that you would make for Aiyuk right now wouldn't be a good trade, wouldn't benefit the 49ers, but for who, for what, and for how this year? Does it help in 2024? And
that's the key.
That's all I care about, man. That's all I care about.
That's the key. That's why this talk about, trade him to the Jets for a 1 and a 2. Well, a 1 and a 2 is a fine price, but in 2025, you're going to have a hard time staring down Trent Williams and some of the veterans and saying, we moved a star player off of our roster in the midst of our Super Bowl window. That's a tough sell.
Well, should we have learned from the DeForest Buckner situation by now?
Well, I mean, and if you learn from that, what's your lesson?
Exactly.
What is the lesson? Hey, you don't trade special players, or is the lesson you don't turn around and trade special players for one draft choice because there's a failure rate of draft choices.
Right. And
I just look at the Niners and go, do they really need Aiyuk? I mean, right now you've got Debo and JJ and Kittle and CMC. You just added Pearsall. You just added Cowing. You're thin at tight end. You're thin at offensive line. At tackle, your defensive line could probably use help. You could use a free safety. You could use a great corner. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if somebody came offering a piece or two, and I don't want to pay Aiyuk $30+ million, and he's there, and he's holding out, at some point you got to do something. I don't know. I don't know what that point is.
The only thing that could, I think, justify okay, we are going to deal Aiyuk here, and we're going to deal him for future assets, not necessarily return on 2024, is this team believes Ricky Pearsall will be in the conversation for offensive rookie of the year in the NFL. Like, if that's what Pearsall is, if Pearsall is a guy who is out here deeply, heavily involved in the game plan to the point where that's why you moved on from Brandon Aiyuk. You don't need Brandon Aiyuk. This guy does what Aiyuk does year one. If that's who he is, then yeah, go ahead and get away with that. I also see a world where Pearsall, I'm going to set your over-under on 30 catches for Ricky Pearsall's rookie year. You going over or under on that?
Over.
I like over.
All right. Well, Juwan Jennings had 19 catches last year. That's it. That's it. The third wide receiver on the 49ers is a forgotten man statistically. So is Pearsall going to be the third wide receiver on this team? I don't think so. Not if Brandon Aiyuk's on the depth chart. I think he's the fourth. Unless he beats out Juwan Jennings, he's the fourth wide receiver on this team. Last year's third caught 19 balls. So, I mean,
just because the usage of Pearsall and the usage of JJ, I think are going to be quite different. I think JJ, you're right, is a third option. He's a possession receiver. I think I could see Pearsall piling up, lots of catches because he seems like a continuity piece that Brock's going to go to a lot.
I like your optimism. I don't even know if he's on the field. I don't know if Ricky Pearsall is getting snaps, much less targets, much less catches. Historically, rookie wide receivers are uninvolved in Kyle Shanahan's offense. Uninvolved, basically. So, what is Pearsall? If you think Pearsall is all that in a bag of chips, then maybe move off Aiyuk. Unless you're totally convinced that's the guy, you should have moved off Aiyuk before the draft. You should have gotten more assets. You should have gone, you should have had You should have done that by now. Like, to me, they painted themselves in the you got to bring Brandon Aiyuk back corner at the price he wants now, because like Chase said, they kind of slow played this thing to their detriment, not their, not.
I mean, they may have just too many great players at once, and it might be, it's funny. Other teams, Kansas City looked at Tyreek and they said, we can win without him. And Philly or Tennessee looked at A.J. Brown, said we could win without him. And Green Bay said we could win without Devontae, and Buffalo said we could win without Diggs.
Well, only one of those teams was right.
But it's interesting because
right about that has the maybe greatest quarterback that has ever played the game.
As far as I don't know if you're only right if you win the Super Bowl, but I'm just saying these teams decided that there was a price point. See, that's the one difference. The difference between quarterbacks and receivers is there's supply and demand issues with quarterbacks, but there's not that supply and demand issue with receivers. So, that's what's pushing back. I think that's what's making the 49ers say, you know what, we need fiscal responsibility here, because if you move off of Aiyuk, there's another receiver coming. There's never been more receivers available than what you see right now on an annual basis in the draft and in free agency. So I think that's the factor here. That's kind of, otherwise you would have just signed him already. And then the other factor here is that he has to be paid at the end. We're here because Aiyuk's camp wanted to be here. And they stated that in February at the Combine. We heard it through Ian Rappaport when he came out and said, you know what? Aiyuk's camp wants to wait till everybody else is signed. Well, they're there. And now we're going to find out if that blows his number beyond the Niners means.
I wonder why running backs became a league-wide devalue that position conversation, but wide receivers have avoided it. I really do. Like, if there are so many, like, these guys are all a dime a dozen. You just need, you got to be fast. You got to make a good cut. You got to catch a ball. And there are 90 guys in America who are good at this right now, can be professionals at it right now. So there is a huge supply. Why is there such a demand for the elite ones then? Like,
I think your premise might be
offensive line and just go get dudes out of the parking lot to play wide receiver.
I think the premise could be wrong. I mean, I think history shows that NFL running backs are getting underdrafted, but because everybody's worried about longevity. But NFL wide receivers, for the most part, there are very few NFL wide receivers that sign a second big contract. They usually get one big contract. So in a lot of ways, I think running backs or wide receivers are similar. Running backs franchise tag number is lower than wide receiver franchise tag number. So, I mean, that's the thing. You're paying Christian McCaffrey the most of any running back, but he's making $19 million. Aiyuk wants maybe $35 million. Who knows? I mean, we have no idea. Probably $30 to $35 million. That's considerably higher than any running back in the league.
I think there's something to be said too, where, these drafts are so littered with really talented wide receivers. But when you draft, groom, develop, invest time and energy into scouting a player, seeing him become special to the point where at the end of their rookie contract, they're deserving and worthy of a new deal, it's a success story for your organization. For Brandon Aiyuk, JUCO guy, goes to Arizona State. Niners had him higher on their draft board as compared to a lot of other teams. Some people thought it was a huge reach, and he was looked at as a little bit raw, right? But comes in, COVID season in 2020, by the way, with no preseason games, limited training camp practices, and in an injury-plagued season for the Niners coming off that 2019 Super Bowl. He led all receivers in production that year and missed time. And then every year that he's been in the NFL, he's gotten better and better and better. So you saw the potential of him becoming a really good player. I think he's exceeded the Niners' expectations. I don't know if they saw him becoming this good. Route runner, deep ball threat, everything to his route tree, a second team All-Pro. And that's why I don't think it makes sense to let a special player like that walk. Yeah, you have really good drafts as far as wide receiver talent goes, but as you both said, they're somewhat known commodities. And that's why if you trade Aiyuk before the year, the time was not to trade him. The time is not to trade him before the year. The time was to trade him before the draft, because then you can find his replacement, you can gather assets. But now if you trade Aiyuk, you're not sure what Pearsall is going to be. And if Pearsall flops, you're in a precarious situation for your offense in a year in which you have Super Bowl aspirations and expectations.